Namaste and welcome to Detours with me Anuradha Goyal, where I talk to some very interesting personalities about journeys of all kinds. Hi Radhika. Hi Sushant. Sushant, you are going to enjoy this conversation. We are going to talk about this book, which talks about three iconic journeys of Swami Vivekananda, Mahatma Gandhi, and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And the author literally takes us on the voyage along with them. And this book is full of a lot of small tidbits that we usually miss out when we read the biographies of these great leaders. For example, Mahatma Gandhi and Swami Vivekananda left the port of Bombay just at a gap of about 1 week from each other. And Swami Vivekananda was at Porbandar before he left for his first foreign tour, and Porbandar played a role in his becoming a traveler or contributed to his journeys. About Netaji and Mahatma Gandhi, we of course know a little bit. So it is a very fascinating book, a very traveler's book, but at the same time, it also covers how the travels shaped the personalities of these three men. We typically know them as Satyenji, please come over and join us. So we know them as leaders. We know them as somebody who inspire us, but we rarely figure out the things that defined their personalities. Yes. So the author, Shri Satyendra Singh ji, is here with us. He should be here live on. Namaste,
Namaskar. Namaste, Anuradha ji. How are you?
Very good. Welcome to this live conversation, and we are going to talk about your book. I really enjoyed reading this book. I'm a traveler. I write travel books. I write travelogues. And for me, this was fascinating. Nobody had looked at these journeys with so much detail, and this is how history should be studied and taught, both. So thank you very much for writing this book. And
thank you, Anuradha ji.
Yes, we'll wait for some more people to join. But it's absolutely coincidental that we are doing this live on 11th September.
Oh yes. It's an extremely pleasant coincidence.
Yes.
That we are talking on this particular day.
Yes.
About these journeys.
Yes. So I'll begin by asking you. You are a NRI yourself. You live in Nigeria, right?
Right.
How long have you been there, or how long have you been out of India?
I completed 11 years now, last month in Nigeria.
Okay.
And that is how I'm for 11 years I am out of India now.
Okay. So how do you relate to these journeys with your own journey? Because whatever little I have lived out of India, I feel that when you live outside, your lens to view India changes. And more often than not, you start appreciating India a lot more.
Very true. Actually, when we are in our own country, in my view, we take it for granted. There are many beautiful things about our own country which we take for granted. But when we come outside and when we look back at India, there is a completely changed view. And we start appreciating our own country, our own history, and what were good things about our country. And that sits on our head, when we are outside India.
Right. So do you think these three men whose journey you have covered may have also or must have also gone through something similar?
Exactly. Those were very different days. I mean, today we are in a very, a connected world. Throughout the day, every minute we are connected. So if you take back yourself 128 years back now, 1893,
Yes, yes.
things would have been very, very different. But when you are in a foreign country, there is entirely different feeling.
Yes. Right. So, how do you relate your personal journey with the journey of these three men? And why did you choose three of them? I know you've written about it in the book, in the introduction part. But if you
Mhm.
can, for those people who are listening to us,
Anybody who is imaginative for go back in history and write and to magnify small things, you have to
Mhm,
be very, very imaginative. You have to imagine those times, go back
mhm,
and be there. So that's what, the first thing is a very good imagination about
mhm,
those people. And
mhm,
for your imagination to be accurate, you got
mhm,
to study about them, about their persona, and the details of the places, details of the modes of transport they took, what came, incidents. So you have to read quite to and fro to
mhm,
verify
mhm,
and be there in your imagination.
mhm.
And why I choose these three, actually, I wanted to tell a story, but I didn't want to tell it in a very usual way, because these three people, there is no dearth of what has been written about them. Huge,
Absolutely.
huge volume
Absolutely.
in many, many countries have been written. So I thought, why not magnify something which is very important and common to these three people? And then I came to these three journeys, actually, which are very, very important in their life. What they did, to a very large extent, depend on these journeys.
Right.
So
They
that's
kind
how
of
I came.
become.
A new way of communicating with the youth, because youth today wants to listen things in a very different way. So I thought
Yes.
maybe this hit the chord.
It definitely hits a chord. You know, I have read a lot about journeys, but still, when I read your book and read in detail, I realized that what we have been reading is just, the whole journey is one sentence. So, Swami
Yeah,
Vivekananda went to Chicago and he gave this speech. But what
yeah,
we do not realize that it's a long journey, not just physically, but also mentally. Also, there are so many variables at play, and there were so many points at which the journey could have broken. There were enough
yeah,
points where the journey could have been broken and we may not have reached for all three of them. It was a dangerous journey in the sense it had its
yes,
own this thing, and we don't realize. You know what the biggest thing, biggest takeaway for me from your book is that what differentiates these three men from a lot of us, because their journeys have points where most of us would have broken, would have given up.
yes,
We would have given up. An average person would have given up at those points. For example, when you described how Swami Vivekananda had no food, no money, nothing. He was sitting on a footpath, but he never gave up the idea of not going to the conference. Or
exactly.
Mahatma Gandhi's, or even Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's journey in a submarine in those times. So the grit with which they hung on to what they wanted to do probably differentiates them from rest of us.
The rest of it. It's a huge drive. You can imagine the kind of drive and focus these people had, and that's why they are called greats.
Right.
And that definitely differentiates them from the rest of the masses. That they hanged on to their mission, they
Mhm.
kept their mission alive.
Mhm.
Whatever happens, they had something to hang on, find a
Mhm.
solution, and
Ji.
move on, move ahead, and get to their end what they wanted. So that differentiates them from many of us, from the rest of the world, and that's why they are all-time greats. And that is how I have taken in my book that these three are they're at the highest level. If we see last 100 year of Indian history,
Ji.
the biggest change these three people brought.
Ji. Okay, so you have written something towards the end of your book which really resonates, and I'm going to read it. It says Vivekananda, who awoke her from deep slumber. If India was a person, Vivekananda, who awoke her from her deep slumber, it was Gandhi who inspired it to stand up and leave the comfortable bed, and it was Subhash who prompted it to run, which kind of connects the three of them in a
Yeah.
sequence, the role they played in our lives. But I'm going to take you to small little tidbits that most of us probably miss. So I had, before you joined, we were talking about the Porbandar connection of Swami Vivekananda and Mahatma Gandhi. Hi,
Yeah.
Lavanya.
Yeah.
So tell us about the Porbandar connection of Mahatma Gandhi and Vivekananda ji.
Right. Right, ma'am. No, actually, as I told you that while researching on these three journeys, I wanted to find every small bit of detail, and I was reading a lot of material wherever I could find the letters written in those period in United States or within India, the letters of Vivekananda, letters of others written to Vivekananda, and I was trying to connect the dots. This Porbandar issue has already been written by other writers also, because before going to US, the 5-year life of Vivekananda was a wanderer's life. He was wandering without name, without destination, without money. He was just roaming around India, and he traveled. He covered huge amount of the country.
Right.
But he was not staying at one place long enough.
Right.
So the Porbandar is the place where he stayed for many months at one place. So there was curiosity among researchers that what made Vivekananda, the wanderer, to stay at one place for so many months. And that's why, it came out that there was a Vedic scholar there, Mr. Pandurang, Shankar Pandurang, and he was, along with him being the administrator of Porbandar, he was also a Vedic scholar. He was, at that particular time, he was translating Vedas, and he found this young man incidentally with him, and he recognized, and he made him his personal guest in his residency. So this connection, and this was the period of, in, I think 1891-92, it was same period when Gandhi had returned after, completing his barrister at law. But by that time, Gandhi's base has moved to Rajkot, and he was moving between Rajkot and Bombay, because he started practice in Bombay, then he came back to Rajkot. So, I've written in the book, there is no evidence that these two people might have met there, but they were together in the same zone in that particular period. So this is the connection, a very strange connection, that two people roaming around in a zone, and both of them went on to become the global icons. I mean, you can't imagine bigger personalities than Gandhi and Vivekananda. So this is, an anecdote to, and the importance of the land of Porbandar.
Right. So that brings me to this Kala Pani taboo that you have touched upon. But, I have been reading about this this myth that Indians were not supposed to cross water and not supposed to travel. And what I have come across is that it was probably a very small population of Bengali Brahmins who had this taboo, that you should not cross the waters. The rest of India was traveling. The Vaishya community was obviously traveling. We have a maritime history which goes back to Indus Valley civilization. And later as well. So we were obviously trading, we were obviously crossing the oceans. So, and Gandhi at least came from that community. So how come he had a taboo? I mean, where did this taboo come from? And did the British really create that taboo for us?
Even in my book, if you read, Gandhi also was outcasted by his community. It is there mentioned in the book, in the chapter Durban to Pretoria, or maybe in the first chapter. This community had also, he told that this boy is out of caste and nobody is going to see him off. Anybody going to see him off at the port, he will be penalized. When he came back, there was a ritual there was a, Bose, as we say, organized in the community to take him back. It was not that harsh, but in some part there is an evidence of Kala Pani, and it is not very old. As you rightly told that our maritime history goes back thousands of years old. This is the era when a lot of practices took place, and they were seen as a mainframe Hindu religion, which actually those practices were not our mainframe Hindu religion. They were lok prathaएं kind of things, or practiced through priests in certain localities. Obviously in Bengal there is a huge evidence. Binoy Krishna Guha's Hindu sea voyage movement was a complete movement in India, and Vivekananda's journey made an immediate impact on that movement because he became popular, and when he came back he was a hero figure, so it impacted that movement. Gandhi was an unknown figure even after this journey for a very long period. He came back only he was known only after maybe about 10-15 years of hard work. So his journey may not have an impact on taboo, but Vivekananda's journey has a huge impact in reducing or eliminating that taboo.
So Satyendra ji, my question was, Gandhi ji came from a Vaishya community, right?
Yeah.
And this is the community which was trading. It was a traders community, and they were definitely trading. And he was from Gujarat, and Gujaratis were trading always. They continue to. So I don't see a reason in his community. Now, it is possible that you don't want your son to go out. That's another thing. You can have that emotion for millions of reasons, and the fact that it was not easy, there was no communication. Once a person goes, you don't know whether the person is going to come back or not. So all those things can be possible, but this community definitely did not have a taboo. Where did this notion came from, or was it documented that way?
Obviously, I mean, see, his elder brother was arranging his younger brother to
please
go.
Type in your question. If you have any question for Satyendra ji, please type in the question. Sorry, yes.
Gandhi's elder brother was arranging, and he wanted his brother to go and study in London. It means he didn't have that taboo. So again, it is not. It is not generalized, or it may not be prevalent in certain places.
Yes.
But the existence of Kalapani taboo cannot be denied, because it's a fact. The movement is black and white available, the Hindu sea voyage movement of Bengal. Obviously, it looks like that in Bengal or maybe in Tamil Nadu, it was much more at that point of time. And it had entered at some point of time, not very old.
Right. So I would say even Tamil Nadu is not possible, because Tamil Nadu is all on the coast, and we have evidence of maritime history of Tamil Nadu very, very strongly. Yes. At this point in time, and I'm also learning, but at this point in time, my research says that the small Brahmin community of Bengal had this tradition, not the rest of us. That's my study, and I can share that data with you if you need any.
Sure.
So the rest of it, just picking up something and applying it to the rest of us, is something that the British did it very well. They picked up something, and incidentally, their translators all came from Bengal. So they might have applied it to everybody, because it
might not have generalized. Possibly it may have got generalized to a large extent.
Yes. So after Vivekananda, I'll come to Mahatma Gandhi. Now, if you look at Mahatma Gandhi, one is the journey that you have described in detail, his journey in South Africa, where he was humiliated, and which kind of shaped his thought process or his personality to a large extent. But you also mentioned that while he was in London, when he was studying in London, he visited this exhibition in Paris, which is the same exhibition which 2 years later Vivekananda visited in Chicago.
4 years later,
4 years later, right? So it seems that Mahatma Gandhi became Mahatma Gandhi because, or his personality got shaped that way because of the travels he did. of the knowledge he picked up, the relationships he made, and the same goes for Vivekananda as well. Actually, Vivekananda actually created a whole network of his followers around the world. Right. So, how did the travels shape these two men? And we'll come to Netaji in a bit.
Uh, Ma'am, you yourself, you are a traveler. So, you know what impact any travel does to us. The amount of learning we get from traveling is maybe you read 20 books and you may not get that much learning. And traveling in those times used to be a very detailed. If we just go back 20 years or 25 years in our own lives, the way we were traveling in trains, the current generation, the generation next, my sons, they travel very fast, or they try to, get some cheap air tickets and they try to go, they don't want to travel. The amount of learning in traveling is huge because you get interface with variety of people. You see the life of variety of people. You experience uncertainties. At times you become insecure and you fight back. So, and in 1893, or maybe before, when Gandhi visited Paris exhibition, it was 1889, the learning definitely would have been huge. Again, this is another anecdote, exactly the way we talked about Porbandar. 2 consecutive World Trade Fairs visited by 2 people, and again they went on to become the biggest icons. Again, is a connection. We cannot, decide that this made a difference, but it is very obvious that it enhanced their horizon, their thought process, and it must have impacted them hugely.
You touch a very important point, and this is something that I have been speaking about lately, but I don't know how many people have been receiving it. It's the traveling to learn.
Exactly.
We are traveling to travel. Are we traveling to learn? Especially when you look at Swami Vivekananda's, the detour he took at Japan to tour around the country. Or he stopped at various places and went around, wherever he got even a day, he would go out and meet people, see things, observe, learn. Somewhere we are definitely missing out on the opportunity to learn when we are traveling. In the curated experience, in the tourism, you are basically being spoon-fed an experience. So I paid for this and this is what I expect, and that is exactly what is served to you. But when you travel, like Swami Vivekananda, when you wander with no agenda and you just walk around and as I say, keep yourself open to the magic, and the magic happens. The magic happens when you don't expect it to happen. So, so that is something that I hope, books like yours would make a lot of people think. I hope we have Ramakrishna ji here, who's joined us and who's a tourism teacher, and I specifically want him to ask his students to pick up this book and read, and this is how travel should be, and travel industry should adapt it. The journeys to learn, So I hope your book will make that impact sometime.
Well-planned tours. You get down at airport, somebody is waiting with a placard, you get into car. So this travel is quite, capsuled kind of travel, and you miss all the interfaces.
Yes.
Just imagine that you have been planned that somebody will come with a placard and he doesn't come.
Yes.
For whatever reason. And then what you learn from your insecurities and how you manage will never go from your life. So
I'll tell you my personal incident. For the first time I traveled to Europe, London. My flight was I took the Swiss Air flight. I missed my connection at Zurich. So my flight was, the connection, in those days they used to put you on the next flight. And I reached London. It was 2 a.m. in the morning. It was raining. My taxi, who was supposed to come and pick me up, didn't. They waited and went off. There were no mobile phones to communicate. My hotel had cancelled my booking because I didn't show up for a certain period of time. I have never been in that country, never been in that continent, but I managed. I managed to survive somehow, and it gave me the confidence for the rest of my life.
Right.
Right.
So,
So yeah, those unstructured time, I always say that we must have an unstructured time in our well-planned itineraries also, because that's where the real learning happens. Because you can't define, I will learn this. You just be a, you just be there to absorb whatever you can.
right.
Right.
And that's
Okay.
what you see in this book. In all these three stories, you find people moving from one place to another place. Nothing is lined up. Things are
Mm-hmm.
happening. Sometimes it's not happening the way you want it to happen, but then you manage.
Right.
So that's what, it gives a glimpse of learning while you are traveling.
Yeah.
And you are actually
And
growing yourself.
right. And there is an element of serendipity as well. Especially in the
Yes.
case of Swami Vivekananda, there is a huge element of serendipity, but serendipity happens when you have made your effort. Without you
Right.
making the effort, the serendipity does not happen.
You are not giving chance for serendipity to happen. You are
Absolutely.
so much planned nowadays.
Right. So great. So you have beautiful illustrations and maps in the book. So tell us, did you create them or did somebody help you create, and how difficult or easy was it to create them?
See, those maps and illustrations were all in my mind, but I'm very lucky to have good creative friends. So one
Mm-hmm.
of my very old family friend came to my rescue as far as the illustrations goes. He's an artist.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Delhi. So he is my family friend right from my home city, Gorakhpur. So he came up and he created those arts for me.
Mm-hmm.
The maps I created with the help of one of my colleague here in Nigeria. We spent a night and he had this skill, computer skill, and he made it for me because I had to sit with him to explain what's happening in the journey, what is important. So that's how two of my friends came to my rescue in
Mm-hmm.
giving, that creative value to the book.
So, Satyendra ji, one more aspect I want you to talk about is the support these people got, especially Swami Vivekananda. There were people like the King of Khetri, you have mentioned, Munshi Jagmohan Lal, you have mentioned people who helped him financially, and I'm sure they would have helped him with the connections and, all the other logistics details. These people are also as important. We sometimes look at these larger than life personalities and we forget that they are very well supported by their support systems.
Yes,
So,
yes.
talk about the support systems for all three of them.
The way you mentioned King of Khetri was they considered Vivekananda their guru, and
Mm-hmm.
they came, with the financial help. But the most important support and help, I think, to Vivekananda's going to United States came from Madras. His one of his pupil, Alasinga Perumal, is the most important person, and his name, I think, should be taken every time we take the name of Vivekananda, because he was most instrumental in collecting funds, in making efforts, and creating huge awareness about his going.
Mm-hmm.
King of Khetri was obviously, he was a resourceful person. He was king. He had money. But these people who didn't have money and they collected the kind of trust they had in Vivekananda at that point of time is very, very important, because once you become hero, there are many people who will trust you.
Yeah.
But in the making of a hero, the people who are around that person, they are the actual person who trust in the capability of the person, and they give in their everything to support. So these his pupils in Madras, and that's why when he came back 4 years later, he touched Madras post, because that was the first port he wanted to touch when he came back after his success, tour of 4 years of United States. If only we talk of with respect to this journey to Gandhi's support system, he didn't have any support system there. He was, merely a 24-year-old boy. There was only 2 weeks he has, reached Durban. His employer was also not very confident about him. And he is traveling. All he had was his education, his London exposure, and his, personal character, which, you see in this book that he was a very, very, strong charactered person who was not, taking anything for the ride. Many of us, if we face that situation and if the people tell that you go to the van compartment, that is the place for the coolies, we'll very silently go.
I also think his education was also his strength.
Yes.
So that's how he differentiated himself from the so-called coolies, So his education, I'm sure his comfort with English, those would have been his big support. And also from the fact that he came from a wealthy family.
Yes. His London exposure was very different actually, because he was calibrating his experience in South Africa with respect to his London school or college exposure. So college is very different. So he was expecting the same thing in South Africa, but it was very, very different. It was very, very, administrative and programmed behavior which he was facing there.
Right. And what about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose?
He was, 46, when he was traveling, when he was doing that travel, and he was already a very matured and a national level, leader. He had already traveled the world. He had already traveled the whole of India. So he was very, very smart, in creating his support system. His support system was a complete, diplomatic support system in Germany. And, it was not easy for anybody to travel in a submarine in World War II. I'm not talking of his personal courage. I am talking of the arrangements and somebody agreeing for this journey to send him in his submarine to a place, and another country is agreeing to pick him up from on the way. So this arrangement itself is a huge support system, and it was his magnetic personality, his diplomatic relations with Germany and Japan, and making himself relevant to these two countries and relevant to what their scheme is. And within that scheme, he has his own interest of, India's interest. So he very smartly, married all these interests together.
Satyendra ji, we lost your connection. We are not able to hear you. Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, now I guess you can start from the last one, Netaji, because we somewhere lost you in between.
Oh. No, what I was trying to tell that, I described his connection, his stature at that point of time. And he was, very, very smart in making himself relevant and his agenda relevant to both the countries, Germany and Japan, and marry it with his own interest, his own agenda of Indian, freedom struggle. So he was smart enough to, it's a miracle kind of thing in those days to have all these interests together and manage himself to be on that, submarine.
But still, I mean, who can think of doing an underwater travel as a civilian in those days? I mean, it's incredible. If somebody tells us even to do it for fun, and my exposure to submarine is limited to visiting a submarine which has been converted into a museum now, which is parked on a beach in Vishakhapatnam. And I have just been inside, and believe me, it's claustrophobic when you're just passing through it and getting out. It's absolutely claustrophobic to be inside a submarine, and if you're not trained to be, and to, where does that courage come from?
That's, that nobody has that answer. All we can say is that, he was a superhuman. I mean, even to have thought of taking such a journey where he was in the submarine for 87 long days.
Yes.
So it's a huge drive that person had. And all I can say, the whole generation is grateful to him for one such act, only one such act. We are all grateful for him.
But I would say when you have a purpose which is much bigger than yourself, and your commitment to that purpose is even bigger, that's where you get your courage from. We may say anything, but the courage is something that comes from your commitment. It doesn't come from anywhere else. I mean, that's how people do bigger things. So your commitment to your task, your commitment to what you are undertaking the journey for, I believe would have been the biggest driver for Netaji, especially because
that commitment was even much bigger than his own personal safety, because the probability of getting to another point in a submarine was very, very low during that period. If anybody who is interested in Second World War, what went on during that period, thousands and thousands of submarine and ships were sunk during the war. These two particular submarines which he took, the one from Germany and another one from Japan, both were sunk within a year by the enemy. So the probability of Subhash Bose reaching to his destination was very low, even in that period.
So we have a question here. It says travel is done for many purposes like trade, education, etc. Yatra is one such aspect. Sir, do you find any consequence in naming such with new terms as pilgrim tourism? This is Ramakrishna ji, who is an academician, who is an academician. So it's his.
See, anything which happened during that period, however, it was, political, it was not religious. But for us, for a grateful nation, those points, those people, that whole journey is like a pilgrimage. When, I visited Art Institute and I stood, on that almost at the same spot where Vivekananda, delivered that speech, I had a feeling of, a pilgrimage. I have
been there, and you're absolutely right. You go numb. You just can't imagine that you're standing at the same place, although the exact same place doesn't exist anymore. But so pilgrimage is not really religious.
I saw a movie in 1982 when the movie Gandhi came, and I was a kid, and that I think is the only movie which I saw with my father. And the opening scene is where Gandhi is thrown on that platform, and it hit my head, and I always wanted to go there. I could visit that place only 4 years back, but when I was standing at the same spot, the feeling was very different. So that's why, I cannot have any better word than, a global pilgrimage for these journeys.
Right. No, recreating these journeys itself is a great task. We should have a museum of these journeys where you can visually recreate them. in terms of documentary. And of course, Vivekananda's journey can very well be, we have so much of cruise tourism going on. You just have to tweak it to create a Vivekananda route or a Mahatma Gandhi route. So I'm sure it is possible. We have to think creatively and innovatively. But I also want to add that pilgrimage is not necessarily religious. We have kind
Yeah.
of narrowed down its definition. If you are a nationalist, your country is your pilgrimage. If you are a cricket fan, a particular ground can be your pilgrimage.
Yes.
So for example, if I am a Tulsidas fan, then Ayodhya and Rajapur and Chitrakoot are my pilgrimage. So pilgrimage can
Yes,
be
yes. I
anything for
remember.
you.
I remember when Bhilai steel plant was created. Nehru called it. This is India's new pilgrim. So
Yes.
anything.
Anything could be, and it can be personal, it can be for a community, it can be for a country, it can be for humanity. So yeah, Ramakrishna ji, you're very right that these should be these should be our pilgrim tours. And while in this book, Satyendra ji has written about 3 international journeys only. In fact, the journeys do not touch India at all. They are all outside India, or they at least start from India and they end in India somehow. But uh, a lot of these people did their journeys within India. I mean, Vivekananda traveled so much within India. Mahatma Gandhi has traveled so much within India, and all our saints, the best of our saints, have traveled. In fact, I keep saying that there are only 2 things common to all great men and women: travel and books. They are voracious readers, and they are great travelers, and both are
Right.
opportunities to learn. They're learners. So as long as you're learning, you are enlarging your persona, you are widening your horizon, and your personality expands. So great. So tell us, what are the other journeys that you plan to document? I'm sure you're not going to stop at these 3.
See, I will definitely in my future books also I will touch heroes. May not be journey, but something where I'll pick few people and I'll see the common things. Like here, the common thing was journey. Maybe something else. But definitely, I will try to tell it in a story form where it is interesting. There is a common thing. The next book, roughly where I am working, is on Bhagat Singh and Che Guevara. Che Guevara is not an Indian figure, but there are certain, similarities in the 2 lives, and there are certain incidents which are very common and very intriguing. So that is one thing. While this journey, I had in mind few more journeys, but writing still is an extracurricular work for me. So I have my own limitation, because some journeys which fascinate me is one journey of, posthumous journey of Jatinnath Das. When he died after 64 days of hunger in Lahore jail, his body was taken from Lahore to Calcutta, and then 1 million people attended his funeral. So that journey is a posthumous journey which can be taken up. Journey of Bhagat Singh after Lahore incident, when he disguised, as a English officer or as an officer, and he travels from Lahore to Calcutta. Again, that journey is a very, very fascinating journey. To that extent, even Savarkar's journey from London to Bombay, where he escaped in Marseille in France, and he was caught again, is a very intriguing journey. And there are many more. But each one, to write as a story form requires huge amount of minute research, to and fro, verifying things, and then, presenting to people as an interesting read.
Right. And you have to be very, very careful, because there's so much that has already been written about them.
Yes.
Yes.
So there has to be, a new flavor should be always there in the story.
Yes. No, but I'm at the cost of repeating myself, I'm saying this book is written in a way that it's interesting. It gives you a lot of trivia. It gives you a lot of anecdotes, but at the same time, it gives you what a journey can how a journey can potentially shape a personality, or how the personalities use their journeys to create their lives the way they create it. The both the things, how journeys impacted them, how they impacted journeys, and how and also uh, a small tidbit that the different modes of transport they used, right from
Yes.
walking to a submarine to flights to almost every
Yes.
possible mode of transportation available during those times have been used in these three journeys.
Right.
Right, which is a great observation you have. I mean, it's all documented, but sometimes that pattern is not visible. I mean, a lot of people don't see
Yeah.
that connection or that that trend or
No,
something. So you have a
from
lot of
from
those observations.
horse driven is say stagecoach, and then train, then modern ships Vivekanand used, and to the extreme of a submarine which was unimaginable. So everything is there. Everything is there in these three
And a,
journeys.
and a transfer between two submarines in the middle of the ocean,
That
which
was
is,
something out of the world.
it was
That
out
was
of.
something out of the world, because the weather was very bad on that particular day, and they had to actually wait for that transfer. So in an inclemental weather, uh, where the sea is howling, and you have to shift from one submarine to another submarine, and there is a danger from the top, from the enemy side. You can be any moment spotted and bombed.
Yeah,
So it can't be described in word, the kind of courage you need to conduct these things. And
absolutely.
the support system which you were talking, the kind of experts available from Germany and Japan to have done it in 1943, such a accurate rendezvous in the ocean, in the huge ocean, find those points, and you are not allowed for a radio transmission, because as soon as you on your radio, you will be located.
Discovered.
And
Yeah.
uh,
Right. And
so
also his companion, and the fact that even inside the submarine, they were busy writing their speeches or busy documenting stuff or planning for what they will do the moment they land on land. You know, how incredibly um, planned that thing was, or how well they used every minute available to them. When we look at these lives and we say that they did so much in the same number of years that all of us have, and then you look at these minute details and you discover that even in a submarine they were sitting and writing their speeches, or they were trying to plan what they are going to do in the minutest possible way, and they know that once they land they will not have the time to do all that.
yes, and that is why I have written somewhere in the book that when we look back, we find them as a superhuman,
Right.
because there are many things which are humanly we don't see as possible. We need so much time to write a book, and here is a person who writes while he is traveling, or some people wrote while they were in jail. There were no Google at that point of time. How they got the books, how they got their references. Even Subhash Chandra Bose book, the Indian struggle, is one of the most authentic book on the freedom struggle, and how he wrote it being in while he was traveling in Europe.
Mhm.
So that's how their utilization of time was something out of this world. That's how they could pack so many things in one life.
Right. So we'll wrap up, Satyendra ji. So anything that you want to tell your readers about the book?
I will say only one thing: enjoy reading it. As you know, I have dedicated the book to the vibrant youth of India. I have used trust in Indian youth, uh, uh, and they should read it. And this will definitely lead them to read more things. And one
Yes.
more thing which I would like to say is that read yourself and conclude yourself. Don't get to the small pieces. Nowadays, a lot of social media posts. Don't get caught into these things. Read yourself, make your own worldview.
Yes. You're saying exactly what I say, but you've given a lot of references also, a long list
Yeah,
of books to be read. So yeah,
right.
definitely it will. I am curious. I want to pick up a few of those books and read. Although I have like a huge library at home to
I,
be read,
I,
waiting
I,
to be read.
I see you sitting in the ocean of books.
It's a small part. I do have a huge library at home, but then that's how you write. I mean, if you have to write, you have to read a lot.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, it's a part of learning. And last two years we've not been traveling, so it's all about reading and writing. So
Right.
great, Satyendra ji. It was great conversing with you, but I really enjoyed reading your book. And I
Thank you
really
so much.
hope that the youngsters pick it up, read it, and then they start reading history from these lenses.
Right.
You
That's
know,
most important.
yeah, it is not that your book gives them anything new, but it gives them new lenses and new windows to see history through.
Right.
So you can also, I mean, it can very well be the journey of modes of transportation. It could be the journey of Indian youth, because both Mahatma Gandhi and Swami Vivekananda were pretty young when they traveled.
Exactly.
So today, when a 25-year-old says, "Oh, I'm too young," I mean, or 20-year-old says, they say, "No, 200 years back or 128 years back, somebody could go with no connection. Today, we are not even disconnected. With a mobile
Right.
phone in your hand, you are hardly traveling alone in the true sense of it." So great. Thank you very much. And we wish you all the best for this book. And
Thank
I
you. Thank you
definitely
so
look
much,
forward
Anurag.
to your next books. I would definitely look forward to many more similar books from you, and wish you
Thank
all
you.
the
Thank you.
best.
I'll try my best.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Thanks a lot, Anurag.
Thank you for joining us on Detours. You can also join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our handle is IndieTales, INDITALES. See you soon.